Hey everybody, bear with me 1 second. I'm going to be inking this t-shirt design today and I'm just getting everything set up, almost there. Alright, cool. So I have figured out how to do this on Facebook at the same time. So if you're joining me there, feel free to leave some comments and I should be able to see them in my little chat box here, and I can try to answer your questions as I draw. If I'm not able to do that, then I can try to answer you later on. In just 1 second. Alright, great. So if anybody was watching last week, we penciled this Mexican zombie illustration for a client. And I talked a lot about how I worked with this guy all the time and there would probably be no changes. Well, that's the worst thing you could ever say because that leads to changes. Um, but they weren't too bad. I had to remove the wings from the chupacabra and take out the flying one in the sky here. Um, I don't know. I looked up a lot of reference, and some of the chupacabras have wings, some don't. He didn't like that. Uh, to me, it's not a big deal. I probably acted like it was a big deal at the time. But so I took them off. We added some spikes. He didn't like the Mexican senorita to be a bride as we had her previously, so we just went and I just drew new clothes on her. But that was it. So today what I'm going to be doing is inking this, and I'm using Manga Studio and Clip Studio Paint. Um, as usual, if anybody has any questions, just throw them my way, and I will try to respond. Um, just 1 second. I'm using this new thing here, this chat box widget, which is really cool. It's supposed to gather all the different messages from all the places that I'm broadcasting, and then it will put them here, which is cool. That way I don't have to look up back and forth at my screen all the time. Alright, cool. So let's get started. So if you've seen me draw before, normally what I'll do is I'll take this pencil drawing and we'll click the blue layer here to make it like a non-photo blue pencil and turn the inks the pencils way down. I want them there to just be a guide because I don't want to be tracing over what I've already done exactly. I just want to let that sort of guide me as to the basic shapes and everything. And let's get, I think I want to use this expressive brush for this one. This is a brush I created. And let's get in there. Usually try to warm up a little bit. A lot of the first strokes I throw, I'll just end up deleting. Yeah, I think yeah, actually, I'm going to use this one today, called Brian's Favorite. And what I've been trying to do lately is to really try to just do the outlines of the illustration first, and not get carried away with all the fun detail, because I always get caught up in that, and then the whole illustration itself gets real muddy really fast. So I don't want to do that this time. So I've been trying to really go through and just draw the basic stuff. Hey Randy and Tammy, what's going on? Thanks for watching. I'm off to a real late start today. I meant to do this more around 2 o'clock, but I was having a lot of trouble streaming to Facebook, and I finally got it figured out thanks to a tech help guy. So that's cool. So I hope that every week now I'll be able to broadcast to all three of those networks. So YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. I still don't really have a lot of people watching on Twitch. If anybody listening has a Twitch account, I'd appreciate a follow. I don't really spend any time on Twitch watching videos. I'm not really a gamer because I got this job and then my kids. So the games I'm playing are like Minecraft and Plants vs Zombies. So I am out of the gaming world probably for good, which is too bad. I used to love it. This week has been insane. I'm gonna end up having to probably work the whole weekend, which is something I really don't like to do, and I don't have to do it too often, which is lucky, I guess. But I got way behind, and I don't want to jinx this, but it's possible we might get a really, really big project. We're working out. I have my bid in, and I think I'm close to getting it. I'll find out on Monday. But if I get this job, it's enormous, and it's due in 3 weeks. So it's gonna totally take the schedule that I had carefully planned and just throw it against the wall. And I'm gonna have to figure that out somehow. Hey, Hugo asked the question if I've academic. So you can tell by the way I'm struggling to say academically that I ain't got much schooling. Have I studied art? So yeah, I studied art in college, but I do not have a degree in art. I have a degree in marketing and communications. So I went into advertising, but I took art classes on the side. So I still did the thing where, like, some old naked guy comes in and you draw him. But I did not. I didn't have a graphic design degree or anything like that. Most of what I learned was just from on-the-job experience, and also watching a lot of video tutorials. Just obviously tons and tons of practice, because I've been drawing all my life. So that helps. I really don't think I've actually been very good at art up until like maybe 3 years ago, and I've been doing it. I've been doing it since 2004. So that shows you, or professionally, I mean, I've been doing it since 2004. So that shows you how long it takes to like get any good at it. And I still have like a long ways to go. And I always say this too: if I ever miss one of your questions, I'm not ignoring it. It just maybe went by too fast. So feel free to ask it again if you think that I missed it. I was talking a second ago about this big job that I'm really, really hoping that we get. One thing that I think that I would recommend that I think really helped our chances was, and I don't do this a lot, but when it's a big job, rather than just putting together a quote, like I hand picked a lot of samples from my portfolio specifically for them, like things that I knew related to the project, and things that I knew that they would like, and maybe things that they haven't seen. And I have this template set up uh, as a PDF in Adobe Illustrator where it's like nicely laid out, and it looks really sharp. And I put all the pieces in there. It takes some time. Like it still took maybe 15-20 minutes to put that together. But when I was talking to them on the phone, they seemed really impressed that I did that. And I think it just shows that you're hungry for the project. You're actually thinking about it. But of course, nobody has time to do that constantly. So I only do it when like a really big job comes around. That was my dog. So this ink brush again is called. If you guys have bought my brushes, it's the Brian's Favorite brush, which I named a little too early because at the time it was my favorite. It's not my favorite anymore, but for this illustration, it'll be perfect. The one thing, if you watched me last week, I was talking about this design being just a two-color t-shirt design. The good news is the client has decided to go full color instead, which I enjoy drawing things full color much more than a limited color silkscreen job. It's just that can be so limiting, you know. So I'm excited about that, which means that I don't actually have to get quite as detailed with the line art because I'm going to be doing a fair amount of rendering in the coloring stage too. So right now I'm just focusing on you know, getting the forms down. And you can see I said at the beginning of the broadcast that I was just going to focus on doing the outlines first before I do any detail, and of course I totally ignored that. I like this chat box thing, but hey, thanks, Tammy. I like this chat box, but unfortunately the comments go by so fast. I'm gonna have to see if I can fix that. So let's see. I see some comments here. So that one for dude, you're saying that you always use Illustrator to ink and Photoshop to color, and why do I use Manga and Clip Studio? So it can be confusing, but Manga Studio and Clip Studio are the same program. That's confusing. The reason I use this to ink versus Photoshop is because to me the engine for inking is, you can't even compare it. I don't know what it is about it, but the level of variation that you can get on the brush is just, it's just night and day. It's just completely different. And I used to use Photoshop all the time because previous to drawing digitally, I used to ink on paper and then color, you know, scan it in and color in Photoshop. I started to try to ink digitally just for convenience reasons, and I never felt like the Photoshop brushes were really accurately mimicking the way that I ink. So I kind of had to change the way that I ink, you know. It kind of changed my art. But when I found this program, it was like a revelation. Like it was just, all of a sudden, this is a tool that inks. It feels like I'm inking with a brush or with a nib. That's what I used to use. Was like a Hunt 104 quill, one of those metal things that you dip and stab your finger with every once in a while. Um, so why do I use this versus Illustrator? Uh, I know so many artists who do just fantastic, beautiful things with Illustrator, but for me, I could never. I use it all the time. Let me say that, but I hate every second of it. I just have never been able to use it where I feel like I'm actually drawing. Instead, I feel like I always say it's like playing Minesweeper. Like I'm clicking anchor points and whatnot. Um, and yeah, I've used the pressure sensitive brushes in Adobe Illustrator, but it just never worked quite the same. Now there are lots of times when I'm designing things and I'm gonna need a vector drawing or a vector graphic rather. So what I'll do is I'll ink it in this program, and you can see like the line art is super sharp, even when zoomed way in. So I'll ink in this program, and then I have another program called Vector Magic that I'll use to do a live trace of the ink work, and it does it perfectly. Like unlike Adobe Illustrator's live trace, where there can be a lot of issues or a lot of inaccuracies with how it traces. This thing traces it like 100%. It's awesome. So I'll do that, and then I'll take it into Illustrator and color it there. Yeah. So Manga is the question is Manga vector? I answer this question a lot, and the answer is kind of. They do have. I'll show you real quick. They do have vector layers, okay? And what's awesome about a vector layer is you can draw anything on it, even with like a soft brush. Whoops. Or not that brush. Something like that, like a texture. And then you can actually edit it just like it. Oops, wait. There's a vector tool. I almost never use it. Here we go. So you can actually just edit your lines, right? I never ever use this though, and I think it would be useful, but for me it just goes back to I would rather throw a stroke, and if I messed it up, just undo it, delete it, or erase it, and throw it again. Um, but you can even like move around a brush like that. It's pretty cool. The problem is you cannot export that as a vector. So when you save the file, it's a Clip Studio Paint file. If you're looking for a vector file, you're not going to get it. And if they can ever figure that out, they've really got something. So I hope that answers your question. Is anybody right now watching this on Facebook, on my Facebook page? I freaking hope so, because it's been a lot of work just to get this thing on Facebook. They make it hard. So that would be funny if I went through all that and like nobody is watching it anyway. It's so much easier to broadcast to YouTube or Twitch. Alright, anyway, so I'm messing around with him. I always start with the stuff that's fun for me as I'm warming up, rather than starting with the most challenging thing. So, in this case, zombie face is pretty standard for me at this point. Ah, that's too bad to hear about. So someone says that Facebook is buffering and not working well. So I'll have to check that out later. That sucks. You know, I actually just checked. It looks like the Facebook live stream is working, which is cool. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like any of the comments are coming through to my little feed here. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. And if anyone had left a comment on Facebook, I'll try to go back and answer it later. Sorry about that. I kind of miss the days where all you had to do was know how to draw. Those days are over. I used to think I was a pretty technical guy, but no longer. I think I must have spent like 45 minutes today trying to figure out how to have the feed go to Facebook and YouTube at the same time. It's like not easy. It's not easy. All right. Anyway, let's talk about drawing and not Facebook. So what else? Sorry, my dog is like totally humping a squeak toy over here. So I have a question here. How does Manga Studio compare to Photoshop for inking? You've never been able to get satisfying lines in Photoshop. I was just talking about that, and the answer is it doesn't compare. Manga Studio is the best, period. So definitely go try it. If you're not happy with Photoshop inking, then you owe yourself to try this out. And it's a super cheap program too. I think it's often on sale for just $30, like a one-time fee. So definitely recommend that. Here's a good question. Any advice for more confident lines? So one thing that I was always taught, and I'm not sure if I even do it, but I should do more of it, is to ink with your arm and not your wrist. Okay, and meaning you want to use your arm like a seismograph almost. You know, this will allow you to do much smoother strokes. If you are, you know, let's try to just draw a circle, because those are hard to draw. You know, you can do better with your arm than you can with your wrist. I don't know. That's a terrible example. But, like, we'll do this little thing here. I'm going to just move my arm. Another, like, a good piece of advice that I try to stick to, and this goes for painting too, you always want to use a brush that's a little bit bigger than you think you need. If you're trying to ink, so right now, what am I using? The exact number doesn't matter so much, but I'm using like a 50-point brush, so that if I put full pressure, that's like that, right? Using a large brush will really let you, and I don't know why, but for some reason it just lets more variation and control come through. So that's one recommendation I would make, is just check your brush size and try to use a brush size that's like a little bigger than you're immediately comfortable with. So I'm going to cheat here with this gun. Manga Studio has these perspective rulers, so I'm going to use those. So throw one like that and throw one like this. And then now every line I draw will follow that perspective. And just in case somebody has taught you that it's not okay to cheat, everybody cheats, especially when there's money involved. So if you're a freelance artist and this is your bread and butter, like you know, myself, go ahead and cheat if it saves you some time and doesn't put you in jail. And in fact, knowing that I'm going to be using those perspective rulers kind of saves time in sketching too, because when I sketch the gun, I don't pay that close attention to the exact lines because I know that I'm going to be straightening them out in the ink stage. And just to go back to your question, I mean, getting more confident lines, just like anything, is just tons and tons of hours and hours and hours inking. Um, myself, I'm just today I was watching YouTube videos of an inker that I love, and just sort of like frustrating. It's frustrating watching it because I look at my work and I think, how can I be like that? So you don't. Nobody ever gets to the point, I don't think, unless you're like, Jack Davis or something, where you're a master, where you've like figured it out. It's just very slow but steady growth over a long period of time. And let's face it too. I mean, I'm kind of more confident with what I'm drawing right now because there's really nothing very complicated. Goddamn dog. There's really nothing very complicated about it. It's a fun illustration with a zombie holding a gun. If this were something that, like, let's say an Egyptian pharaoh or something, something that I don't draw a lot of, and there's a lot more reference involved, then that can definitely slow me down. Yeah, somebody mentioned Inktober, and I did it the last 2 years, but I'm not going to be able to do it this year. Sorry about that. So yeah, I'm not going to be able to do it this year. I'm way behind on work, and we're going to be going out of town a couple times this month, so it's just not going to happen. And it's so much fun watching what everyone else is cooking up, and after seeing all that, I realized, because had thought about just maybe I'll do Inktober, but come up with a theme that's pretty easy and quick or something. And I'm glad I didn't do that because everybody else is bringing their A game, and I don't want to be embarrassed that way. But I love inking on paper. It's something that I really don't do anymore for client work. I just do it for myself, like for fun, and that's too bad. Because there's way more, I think, expression and creativity that comes through on paper. And then, of course, when you're done, it looks a lot better hanging up on a wall. Okay, so this is a really good comment. I'm glad you brought this up. So, KT says that when you use like the straight line guides and things in your ink drawing, it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb because everything else is hand drawn, and then you have these like super straight lines. And actually, that's going on in my drawing right now because I use the straight lines for this gun. What I like to do is I'll throw down the guides, and then I will go in, and I'll show you here in a second. I will go in and try to add, where are you? I'll try to add some variation to them. So here, let me show you this. So like these sections are way, way too straight, so I'll just like bite into them a bit. And then even here, like every once in a while, you can just do something like this. Like just paint with transparency and shoe into it a little bit. And often that's enough to take your eye away from the super straight kind of cheat effect, you know. You could also try using a different brush. Like there's a textured pen brush that I really like that comes with Manga Studio. And if you use that, you can still draw in a straight line when using the guides, but it kind of has a little texture and sort of organic look, yeah, organic feel to it. All right, so okay, the gun's coming along, and you'll see with these like ornate designs, I don't want to sit here and draw perfect ornate designs. So what I do is sort of fake them, like just draw a little bit of the shadows that would come between them, and then when I color, I'll just add a couple highlights here and there, and you kind of just get the feeling of the ornate engravings. Because as soon as I sit down and try to make them really accurate, then one little mistake is going to stick out like a sore thumb. So I don't have time for that right now. Alright, I want to move on from this gun and get to the Chupacabra. KT, I appreciate you buying the brushes, thanks. And your comment about like your comment is you get so caught up in drawing you don't think past your nose, you know. And I wouldn't worry about that. Like I don't. Okay. So I'm drawing and talking to you guys at the same time. But if you weren't here, I'm not usually like really thinking or planning out my next move or anything like that. Like, I usually have the TV on or a podcast on or something, and I actually think if you think about things too much, your brain gets in the way of your hand, you know. Um, so that's actually like to watch TV or listen to podcasts while I'm inking to kind of like get my brain out of the room, you know. All right. So there's a question: why is it so difficult to write text on a curve in Manga Studio? Um, I actually, and I hope the people in Manga Studio don't hear this, but I hate the text in Manga Studio, and I don't even use it at all. So whenever I need to lay out text, I always do it in Photoshop, and all of the text that you see here, there's nothing real fancy about this text, but it was set up in Photoshop. The cool thing is you can very, very easily just save uh, the artwork as a PSD and then open it in Manga Studio. The only trick is once you open this in Manga Studio, it's no longer text. It's now rasterized. So what I have to do, and it sounds annoying at first, but you get used to it. I have two versions of this file. One is the artwork, and then one is the text. So as soon as I'm done with the artwork, I bring it back into Photoshop and just move that text layer on to the drawing. It would be excellent if they someday get a more robust text tool, but I don't know. they've made some attempts and just kind of fell flat, I think. They did everything else right though, so let's cut them some slack. Yeah, Randy says, yeah, Adobe Illustrator is also excellent for text, um, but I like I like the layer effects in Photoshop. I use a lot of those, probably too many of those. Sorry, my camera kind of creeped down there. Um, okay, here's a good question from KT. How do you stop blending from pulling in the background colors? All right, so what KT is talking about is Manga Studio has a great blending engine, but you sort of have to be conscious of what layers you're working on. Um, there are some settings, and let me finish this rose, and then we can talk about those. Um, there are some settings where you can change the amount that it pulls from the background colors. For example, you could make it so that it only blends from the color you just laid down. Um, but often what I'll do, if I'm using a blending brush, which actually I don't use those a whole lot, but when I do, I often just will start a new layer for that color, because there are times when I don't want that new color to blend with what's below it, you know. So that for me is the best way to control it. So I'll do the new layer, I'll do some paint work, and then when I'm done, I merge it down to the rest. I suck at drawing roses. Okay. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. All right. So this I'm going to be drawing a frame eventually around everything. So that's why that zombie just sort of abruptly stops. When I'm drawing like really straight, or not straight, but really like mechanical lines, I have this brush here that's just a dead weight line that I'll use a lot. And so we can actually turn up the stabilization. Looks like cake frosting. And Manga Studio also has some cool shape tools, which I always forget to use. I always forget when I'm inking to try to use like actual shapes and mechanical lines when the art calls for that, because that, I think that actually mixes well with like the rest of the organic inks, or not mixes, but like it's a nice contrast. This tool is really nice, this continuous curve tool. It, uh, So I'm gonna draw. I don't want to do those bullets, so I'm gonna draw the chupacabra back here. One thing that I love about digital art is we can cheat like this. So I'm gonna close everything here, and then get the wand out. Whoops. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I have an action set up that's just going to mask off everything. So now I can paint or draw behind cowboy and not have to worry about staying in the lines there. There we go. Alright, cool. So let's do chupacabra. Oh shoot, I'm getting comments that my mic is all screwed up. It sucks. I got this mic on Amazon and it worked great for a long time, and then all of a sudden it started to do this, where it'll work fine for like half an hour, and then it stops and it goes weird. Sorry about this, guys. Bear with me a second. Can anybody hear me? Farts. All right, so sounds like people can hear me now. Does it? You still hear an echo? Does it sound okay? All right. Well, I'm maybe I'm a pro artist, but I am not a pro broadcaster yet. Still working on it. Thanks for your patience. So Nicholas asked me, and I appreciate you say sorry for the strange question. I love strange questions. So how did I decide I want to draw for a living, or how did it materialize between I want to draw for a living to actually doing it? So I graduated from college in 2004, and I went right into a art job as an illustrator for a motorcycle graphics company. And I never really, like, I'm not really good at anything else. So I've never really actually even been interested in much else than art and drawing. So to be honest, if that hadn't worked out, I don't know what I would be doing. But that being said, from that job, it took another. It wasn't until 2012, so a whole 8 years later, that I was doing this full time on my own. So I was working, you would say, professionally as an artist, but a lot of the time I wasn't drawing what I wanted to draw, or drawing the stuff that I consider to be my stuff, So if somebody asked me how long would it take, and I said 8 years, that probably would be pretty discouraging. Um, but since then, since 2012, I've been doing this for 5 years now, like freelancing full time, and uh, I still have so much to learn, and so much area to improve in. Um, but now I'm getting older, so it's that changes the game a little bit because I don't know. Before, when I was younger, it just seemed like I had infinite amount of time to accomplish everything and do anything I wanted to do, and this could wait. But now, not so much. And I got two kids, so they're gonna end up hopefully going to college or something someday. So I'm gonna have to pay for that. So that's gonna be another thing. Anyway, so how did it materialize? Just a lot of hard work and dumb luck. Um, and a lot of good, fun, cool projects, and a lot of crappy, shitty, low-paying, embarrassing projects too. Um, I've done them all, and if anybody tries to act like they haven't, they're lying to you. It's just a part of growing and doing this professionally. And the whole point is just that every day you do one less stupid project and one more that you love, and or not every day, but every year you want to be doing less of the dumb and more of the cool. As long as I'm doing that, I'm happy. So here, what I'm doing, like I said at the beginning, I really want to just try and get the important lines down on the Chupacabra, and then I'll go back in once I have the bold lines in and do like lots of little hairs and like sores and textures and stuff like that. But you don't want to do those right at the beginning because you end up losing the form of the whole creature. So Nick, you asked a really good question earlier, and there are a lot of people who listen to me that are just starting their career, or like high school kids contact me who say that they are considering art school or whatever, and I try to give them my best advice. But one important thing to remember is that this business, even in the short time that I've been doing it, it changes so much that the path that I took might not even be relevant anymore. And I've learned this because I talk to a lot of people who are in their 40s or 50s, and they were artists back when I was still in high school, like in the 90s, for example. And anyway, in the 90s, everything was completely different because they didn't even have to deal with stock art yet, and they didn't have to deal with competing across the globe. The internet didn't even close to exist like it does today. So talking to them, it was completely different industry. They were paid a lot more for one, but they also had to spend a lot more money marketing themselves too. So if you ask them, okay, well, how did you get to where you are? A lot of the stuff that they would tell you is no longer even relevant. Like, it just wouldn't even work anymore. Just a practical example, like a lot of those guys advertise their work in like Directory of Illustration and those print books. That was the only way to get work. Oh man, I have a dog, by the way. Yeah, Randy. Randy, I know you've been doing this. I thought we were like maybe 5 years apart. I don't know. Uh, I know you've been doing this longer than me, so I mean, what I'm trying to say. I think like I'm just making it up, but you know what I'm saying. I think. Um, so a question from Hutch: do you ever use the reference layer tool when you're laying flats? Yeah, I love. I have a video on this. I love the reference layer tool, and what that does is it allows you to use the data from another layer to do things on a separate layer. So I could use and that's what I do when I flat things. So I'll go in and lay in the solid colors, and I'll set that to a reference layer, and then just get out the wand and select certain areas to color. It's so much faster because in Photoshop you can do that, but you'd have to constantly switch back and forth between layers, and this allows you to not have to do that. If you're interested in that, I've got a video on that on my channel, on my YouTube channel. The As far as do I use reference layers to make the flats themselves, sometimes what that would allow me to do is to kind of use my existing line art as a coloring book in a way, and sort of just trap the color. The problem with the way it doesn't always work for me, because especially a drawing like this, it doesn't have a lot of solid empty areas, because I draw a lot of these smaller lines, and those lines are gonna end up throwing the reference layer thing off, you know. Randy, I would love sometime. I don't know how we could do this technically, but what we ought to do is like have us do a podcast together, or not a podcast, but a broadcast like this together somehow, or have you call in or something. Because I'd love to talk to you more about your experience and stuff like that, and I'm sure a lot of people could learn a lot from you. So if you started in '98, I graduated high school in 2000. So yeah, at that time I thought I was the greatest artist in the world, but I was not. I came to find out later. But yeah, just from talking to other artists in your age group, well, you're not really in an age group, but people who were doing it in the '90s, I've heard that it was just a completely different economy and situation. But that gives you a skill that a lot of people don't, like people like me don't have. Is that like you are probably more able to adapt because you've been through a lot of changes. That's why I always encourage freelance artists, and I see this happen a lot, is to not get too comfortable in one industry. Like I know some freelance artists where pretty much all the work that they do is just for like smaller bands. You know, their whole client base is just bands. It's just album covers, flyers, gig posters, whatever, over and over again. And you want to be careful, like putting all your eggs into a basket like that because things could change so quickly. Um, which in the music industry, of course, they already have big time. I heard that was see that's another thing. It's like every big change that comes, there's an industry that used to be great for artists that no longer is even available, and the music industry is one of them. Um, I do illustrate a number of album covers, but we get a lot of quote requests for album covers, and almost nobody can afford anything above like $250 or something very very low. So it's just and it unfortunately that's unsustainable. So all right, so then I basically just take a smaller brush and do lots of messy detail. I always put the drawing the women off to the last thing because I suck so bad at it. It's really tricky for me. Um, so most of my women are drawn like in cartoon proportions because I'm sort of hiding behind that. Something I'm trying to work on. I should ask my wife if I could hire a drawing model to come in. See what she thinks about that. Yeah, thanks, Randy. I mean, I was gonna say like you are. If anyone's listening, you should go check out Randy's work. It's great. Um, but you are so excellent at drawing female proportions, and so I study your work a lot when I'm trying to draw that and fall flat. One problem I have is that like when I'm really trying to draw one accurately, then what happens is the pose gets really stiff, you know. So I've got like drawing mannequins and things like that, but it probably goes back to what I was saying earlier that if you let your brain get in the way of your hand, um, then it hurts the final result. So you probably just have to practice it so much that you just go on autopilot and draw. Um, so that's what I need to do. I need to make an effort to like maybe draw a couple a week just for practice. All right, Chupacabra. So let me see. I'm sorry for zooming in and out all the time. I usually just use this window over here to give me an idea of what's going on, but for this drawing, that's not cutting it. All right, let's do the Senorita. Sorry for the delay. I'm just pulling up some reference I had. Always fun looking up reference of the ladies. Cool. In the future, I'll have to figure out a way to monitor both Facebook and YouTube comments at the same time. This is starting to get tricky. I apologize if you asked a question on Facebook and I haven't gotten to it. Randy, if you're still watching, you need to live coach me here. Never mind. That's way too much pressure. I'm actually zoomed in way too much here, actually. So I got to remember that this will be this is going to be printed on a shirt. So this little senorita here, she might be 3 inches tall. So I don't want to get carried away. Which means I got to focus more on the shape of her than the actual details. I hate drawing wrists, so everybody I draw has a bracelet. Just a fun fact. I think I'm gonna try to see Blade Runner this weekend if I can get some time. I keep hearing awesome things about it, which is encouraging. That's 2 in a row, Hollywood. You got It right. That was a good one. Well, my kids are home. It might be time to stop this. I hope you can't hear that. They're fighting. Actually, that would be a great place to stop. I was hoping to finish the whole thing, but it's 5:20 here now, so I better get moving. But maybe if anyone has any last questions, feel free to send them through. And if not, I will be back next Friday. If I missed anything, or if you didn't get a chance to throw a question at me, feel free to post it in the comments. And if anyone is new to Manga Studio, I've got a bunch of tutorials on my channel you can check out. And you can purchase my brushes from my website, flylanddesigns.com. And we'll see you then. Thanks a lot.